I had an opportunity to watch a clinic with Garrett Hoisman this past weekend, and so we have used some of the pictures from his book, If Horses Could Speak, and The Tug of War, and talking a little bit about balance and those kind of things. So he's one of my uh, heroes about really being able to talk about the mechanics of the horse and how the back works and how the neck works and all that stuff. So it was interesting to watch the clinic and really grateful that there are people out there really working hard to get that information out for everybody. And then on the other side, it really made me more confident in my, the way that we talk about what the reins mean and what the legs mean. Hello, welcome. So, I invite you to um, join in if you have any questions while we go along. You can raise your hand, you can unmute and come on in, ask questions, type in the chat, give reactions. I enjoy the interaction, so don't feel
Okay,
uh,
great.
shy. And I know that everybody else always appreciates it when people ask questions. Everybody benefits. So thank you for coming. So we're going to talk tonight about fear, and I was just talking about a clinic that I was with over the weekend with Garrett Hoisman, and I love the these this whole idea. The horses, of course, they have to go from the back to the front. We want them from the inside leg to the outside rein. All of these things really important. I think where it's getting confused is that sometimes the horses are not educated and they can be resistant. And then when people are trying to ride this way, they're feeling a little bit out of control. And so for me, when I was watching him teach and watching the different people, the different horses, how they were all responding, it really made me even more confident in this approach that I have about what the reins mean and what the legs mean, and that the horses can actually mentally understand what we want if we stay on track. So, and I think that that is a huge part of when we feel in control or when we don't, is if we feel that the horses understand what we're asking and they can act on that, or are they resistant and then we feel a lack of control and then we feel like we can't let go. So I like to start with definitions. I feel like that gets us all on the same page. So we're talking tonight, fear, how to recognize it and eliminate it. And fear, the definition of fear, a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, pain, etc. And then this is whether the threat is real or imagined, the feeling or condition of being afraid. Welcome, Jennifer. We're going through the definitions. Fear, a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, pain. Hey, Carrie, whether the threat is real or imagined. This is really important in this conversation tonight. Whether the threat is real or imagined, and the feeling or condition of being afraid. And then recognize, part of our title, fear, how to recognize it and eliminate it. Recognize, to perceive as existing or true. Realize. So sometimes we might have fear and we might not realize it. And then the eliminate, to remove or get rid of, omit, remove from further consideration. To remove from further consideration. So how do we become aware of what is going on with us in our responses, in our reactions, and then how do we just not act on that? Remove it from our consideration, start operating from a place of confidence in ourselves, really is going to be our ultimate goal. So the reasons why we can feel fearful, starting off, the first one, a lack of trust in ourselves. That can be our skills, really that lack of trust in doing the right thing at the right time, that lack of trust that we're going to do what our trainer wants us to do, the lack of trust in doing what our horse needs us to do. So our lack of trust in ourselves. Lack of control. So we can be fearful if we feel like we cannot control our horse. Though we can't control the surroundings. And so then the surroundings are affecting our horse. And then, of course, the lack of control of ourselves, whether that's emotional control or physical control. Sometimes we do know that we have certain responses, physical responses to fear, and then we end up not feeling in control of our body. Our body doesn't do what we want it to do. So that knowledge can make us fearful. And then the fear of other people's opinions, the fear of judgment, and then we can feel fearful when we don't have a belief in the system that our trainer is teaching us. And that can be with the knowledge that we don't have belief in it. And it also can be in a little bit of a self-talk in the background that's going on, where the trainer is telling us that something is going to work, that if we operate in this way, it's going to work out that way. But in the background, we're saying to ourselves, no, my horse is not going to respond correctly, or my horse doesn't do it that way, or I can't do that, what you're saying. So sometimes we can feel fearful if we don't believe in the system that's being taught to us. We can be fearful of physical danger. We can be fearful of emotional stress. We can be fearful of failing. And then that failing is really are we failing in the eyes of other people? Are we failing in the eyes of ourselves? Are we failing in the eyes of our trainer? Are we failing in the eyes of our parents or our significant other? So oftentimes that fear of failing, we need to, we'll talk about that later, but it's a perception, right? Because as we grow and we start to understand life a little bit better, we really understand that making mistakes is all about learning. And there is no real failing. Failing is a perception, but there is oftentimes a big fear that comes up from that fear of failing. So the next thing is horses' fear. So in addition to this fear that we can have going on for ourselves, we can have the horse's fear. So their lack of control, lack of ability to keep themselves safe, they get fearful if they don't understand what the rider is asking, if they don't have control of their body. So if we're locking them in a way, hello, Sarah, welcome. If they're getting locked in a way that they can't operate in a place of balance, they can't operate in a place where they're controlling their own body. If horses don't have a clear understanding of their surroundings, and welcome, it's all good. It's just fun that you made it. Never worry about that. We're talking about fear. So if they don't have if they can't make sense of their surroundings, we are taking them to a horse show with a big environment. We didn't do some kind of training at home to create that state and help them to stay in that state when the environment is getting a little bit busy and they can't understand and manage themselves in these surroundings, these new surroundings. I think time pressure can really cause horses fear, whether they're creating it or we are creating it. So time pressure can be that we feel pressured to accomplish something in an amount of time, whether that's within one ride or over a month of teaching flying changes or something like this. It also can be that time pressure. How long does it take them to get to that thing that's scaring them a little bit? And we put pressure on them to get that done sooner. So I think that horses can have fear over the time pressure that humans have. And oftentimes with young horses, they will go slowly when we first start riding them. And because they're not really balanced with the rider and they're finding their sea legs, as they get a little bit more balanced and we start to ride them more forward, we actually start to dictate how fast they go toward things that might frighten them. And where they are used to, maybe in the paddock, they see something funny, they might walk up to it slowly and take it in. And they're going to be curious and they're going to be brave, but they get to decide how fast they're going to get to that chair or that pile of leaves or whatever it is, that dog. But when we're in the arena and we start to feel like they're listening to us, then all of a sudden we're accelerating them toward that scary thing. They're not focusing or understanding. And we put that time pressure on, like, you have to get there right now. I think that can cause them fear. And so us really paying attention to their state and their ability to hear what we have to say and start to trust us, that's a process. And it doesn't happen, from right away. You need to take time with that. Time can really cause a lot of problems. And then physical discomfort, of course. Horses can have, they can block and they can defend when they feel physical discomfort. So it's kind of, I do a lot of webinars about fear. This one has come about from a little bit different place, partly because of the clinic, and then also just some things I've been playing around with in my own training. So letting go, that idea of letting go is the easiest thing to do when things start to go wrong, like just as far as physically. letting go, not holding, not pressurizing, not muscling. Letting go is the physically easiest thing to do, and yet it's the hardest thing to do. When things don't feel like they're going right, letting go can also be the hardest thing to do. And so when I was talking about with the clinic over the weekend, uh, the first thing that he wanted to see was everybody letting go, riding the horses around without any contact at all, and that they could get, he could get them really, get the horses very nicely in front of them. And I really love that. I I noticed that the kids had no problem with that. They're bouncing around on their little ponies. They could drop the reins, they could pick them up. One kid had a little bit easier time than the other because one of the ponies was really frightened of the people watching. Yet that the way that he managed it and the way that they worked through it was really great. But there were also some older ladies that when they were letting go of the reins, they were losing a little bit their balance, and the horses were not going where they wanted them to go. And for me watching, that didn't look comfortable. And so I think as we go through this tonight, I came to some conclusions about what we need for ourselves so that we can be better partners for our horses, and then also what the horses need to do for us so that we can feel comfortable to give them what they need. It has to work in both ways. If we don't trust the horses when we drop the reins, then it definitely is not, it's not going to work. And if the horses aren't focused on our seat and they're not focused on our legs, and they're, when we touch the reins, they're resistant, there's no reason why we should be relaxed. That is not relaxing. So if you get in the car and you start steering it and the steering wheel turns, but the car doesn't turn, we don't start going on the gas pedal or trying to do the stick shift in order to steer the car. We take the car to the mechanic and we fix the steering wheel. And so for me, I think that we all need to train our horses. What do the reins mean so that we can ride with very light aids? We cannot ride with light aids if our horses are actively resistant. So neutral is the best place to start. So letting go is the hardest but the easiest, and neutral is going to be your best place to start. So what does neutral look like for me and for my horse? If I pick up the reins and my horse is in active resistance, that is not neutral. If I put my legs on and my horse pushes back on the legs, that is not neutral. So I like to put these things in a little bit with the groundwork before I get on. So I'm sure with the groundwork that when I put my leg on, my horse knows to yield to that leg. When I ask him to go backwards, he feels comfortable to find the hind legs, and that I can address that forward and back, first with the halter and then with the reins. Then when I get on, there is this neutral understanding. There's this yielding when I ask for yielding, and then there's not unhealthy pressure when I'm just sitting in a neutral way. And then another funny thing that I thought about is that doing a U-turn is easier from a slow speed. And this is something that came to me from a different direction, but I really started thinking about it in the riding, where if your horse is, I talk about it in my teaching, if you have resistance and then you add energy, you're good, and the horse doesn't understand. So if I have many of the trainers are teaching us, when you get the hind legs better, the neck will feel better. And in a mechanics and a physics way, this is absolutely true. But if in a mental way, your horse is not understanding the reins, and then you just keep adding energy to it, you're just going to get more and more resistance. And so when you have to change direction, so I'm working on something and it's not going well, making that change, doing that U-turn, saying, let's work on this instead, that can be done much easier from a slower speed. So in our minds, or in the horse's mind, if they're not understanding us, riling things up is just going to get more and more tension. It's just going to get more and more fear messed up in it. It's going to get more and more reactions. It's not going to get, we're not teaching our horses. So when we start feeling like, okay, it's not what I'm working on, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm getting frustrated, I'm getting down in that hole of repeating things over and over again, I need to make a U-turn. I need to start to focus on something else. I need to change the subject. Slow it down. A U-turn works out much better when we slow things down and we give ourselves time to apply those aids in a very clear way. We give ourselves time to know, what actually do I want my horse to do? How am I going to know when to relax the aid because he did it? Because everything is brought to a, if you're in a conversation with somebody, which is more where this started coming into my mind. When we start talking faster, we start talking louder, it doesn't make things better. If we slow the conversation down, we find a couple pauses here and there, that will always get a better result. So the three funny things: letting go is the hardest but the easiest. Neutral is the best place to start. And doing a U-turn is easier from a slow speed. And so what does that look like if we aren't starting from neutral? So I talked about the neutral as far as aids go, but what if we're talking about a mindset? What if we're talking about starting from guilt, from fear, from resentment, or from judgment? What does that look like if we're starting from that place? So we're coming in to ride our horses, but we've got the wrong stuff going on in our heads. So if I'm talking about guilt, he doesn't deserve that I ride him and make so many mistakes, right? I don't have good timing. I'm feeling guilty that I'm not a good enough rider for my horse today. If I'm not able to get out of each other's way because of fear, control is going to impede flow, right? So if I start out from a fearful place, my control that I'm trying to reel him in and make sure that not one step happens without me asking for it or controlling it, that's going to impede flow. So we want to be careful that we don't start off from a fearful place. That might mean some groundwork before we get on. And then resentment. I don't deserve that my horse makes me look stupid, or I don't deserve that my horse makes me work so hard. I've had a couple of students through the years is like, when is he going to start giving back to me after all I've done for him? You know, starting off from that place of resentment, like, I work so hard, I pay so much, I do all these things. When is he going to start paying me back? So that's not a neutral place to start in. And then that place of judgment, you know, people think I'm not good enough, I'm uncoordinated, I'm inept, I'm stupid. You know, if I start out already judging myself or believing that the people around me are judging me, that's for sure not a neutral place either. So we end up wasting a lot of precious energy if we don't start from neutral. Now, one of the things that Gerd talked about a lot this weekend was his idea that many people are turning horses into slaves in the sandbox, he calls that. And I know that anybody that's showing up here in one of my webinars does not look at horses that way. And our whole goal is to create and build a beautiful rapport and connection with our horses. So it made me sad that, you know, he's addressing a lot of people like they're making this slave in a sandbox. But if I think about it, what would create that situation is that when we come to our ride without the belief that the horse will willingly participate in the lesson with us. And many people that know me know that I started off with this concept that we could work with horses as dancing partners, and we could teach them how to positively anticipate what we want, so that it really felt like there was more flow together and there was a lot more rapport. And then I went through a little of a period of working with people who did not necessarily agree with that. And then I was able to get back on track with somebody who was teaching much more on that positive anticipation. And what Mr. Schumacher really is all about teaching that mental aspect so that the horses can understand what we want, and they can put themselves toward the work in a positive way where we don't need to be making them slaves and be in control of every single step and holding them in so they don't make mistakes. So for me, the concept comes from people who do not believe that the horses can have that mental understanding. And once we change that belief, then all of a sudden the way we approach the horses is going to be a lot different. If we are the ones who make the mistakes, but then we over control the horses, then this can also cause stress and pressure. So if we are not riding in a positive forward way, if we are losing our balance and these kind of things, and then because the mistakes happen, then we start over controlling, that can also be a little bit of a backward slide. That can be a downward spiral. So the aid is only successful when it can be released and that the response can be repeated. So I like to know that things are repeatable. I can make the aid, I can get that response from my horse, I can repeat that aid, I can get that response again. That comes from positive reinforcement. It comes from my body language. And then the horse fights more and more for the right thing instead of defending against what we do to control them. So then kind of a funny thing is that when you start thinking about, does anybody have any questions so far? Or is this making sense, I hope? Um, when you start thinking about human nature and horses' natural instincts and the horse's nature and how that can sometimes bump into each other. So our nature is to notice what's wrong in order to keep ourselves safe. When we're riding horses, they benefit from positive reinforcement. So what that means is we need to start noticing what's going right. For me, this is a really important thing. If you think about it, where we are naturally made up to notice the things that could be, whether it's somebody that is having a bad mood, or a car that's going too fast on the highway, or another horse in the arena with us that is misbehaving, or our horse that is not going forward from our legs, whatever it is, our nature is to notice what's going wrong. People that notice what's going right, we've had to train ourselves to do that. We've had to actually work at building up that mindset, which is a very interesting thing. But if our nature is to notice what's going wrong, and horse's nature is to benefit from positive reinforcement, that's something that we really need to work on. Sometimes we've talked about in the past that idea of, 2 or 3 positive reinforcements, positive rewards for good reactions to our aids. And, either, one correction or just kind of letting those negative things, unless they're dangerous, of course, that's never okay. But just not overreacting on the mistakes, but really positive aids and positive rewards when things are going well. And that's something we have to work at. That's something that we're not around it a lot. The people that we're spending time with are not like that. So we need to hone that skill. And then humans want to be in control and have that certainty of what's going to happen and what it's going to be like and how it's going to feel. Well, horses actually want to be in control too. So that's something that we need to work together, where we teach them these responses so that they can be in control of their bodies without pressure. Pressure creates a response, but the relaxation, that release of pressure, just says, carry on as you are. So this is very important. Otherwise, we're going to be in a battle of who's in control all the time, and we're never going to win that. Then human nature, we base a lot on our competition and our accolades and our standards. And horses are going to be in the present. They're going to be in the here and now. They're not really thinking at all about if they're winning at the horse show, or if they're what other people think of them, what their buddies think of them. So horses are in the present, and we have to let go of those standards and let go of that emphasis on competition. We can maintain an idea of purpose. We can maintain that idea of rapport, connection, teaching as the levels go along. Of course, we're going to do that. But competition as a thing, that's not in the horse's nature. That survival of the fittest, that might be out in the wild, but we are working with them in a human atmosphere. So we don't want to put them in that survival instinct. So we want to really think about them being in the present. We want to be in the present with them. And we're going to work with them, whether it's on a, just a training day, where they meet us that day. How do they develop in that ride or in that workout session? And the horse that we end up with at the end of the session is not going to be the horse that we started out with. But that's because we're both in the present, working in that state, not because we're thinking about where we need to be next week or who's going to be at the show that we have to beat or any of those things. So horses are here and now. We need to meet them in that place. And of course, we're going to have goals, but we still need to meet them in that. That is true training, is meeting them where they are right now. Humans often lose the awareness of their bodies and the effect that the body has, and can react on triggers without thought. So unfortunately, because of how we grow up and how society is talking all the time about what's wrong with us and what we need to fix and how we need to do this weight loss program and how we need that makeup and that shampoo and all of these things, we are oftentimes really getting out of our bodies by accident. And so that takes practice to really stay present and aware of what our bodies are doing, how they're responding, that we're not, breathing up in our shoulders, that we can wiggle our toes in our boots, that we feel our legs around our horses' bellies, these kind of things. Now, if people can lose that awareness of their bodies, horses have complete awareness of their bodies, and they want to protect themselves. That's in their nature all the time. So we have an innate ability to stay in our bodies that's been a little bit trained out of us, I think, by that outside awareness and that worry of what people think of us. And horses are always in their bodies. So many people will say things like, I don't know what happened. Everything seemed fine. And then all of a sudden, there was just this chaos, and he blew up and he spooked and he ran away. And that is our lack of awareness of what the horse's body and the process that the body was going through. Horses are flight, freeze, and fight. Those are the three things that they can do to protect their body. And oftentimes we misunderstand that freeze, and we think our horses are fine, but the state is not really fine. And in the same way, we don't recognize our own freeze. So the horses recognize our freeze because they feel it, but we don't recognize our freeze. So, and we don't recognize their freeze. And so that can cause a little bit of what we feel later. It was an overreaction. I don't know why you did that, but it's that feeling of, okay, now I'm in a bad state. I feel scared. And now I need to have that flight instinct comes in. So that having that awareness is going to help us to get to that state sooner, to be able to work through it sooner, to get the horse back in connection and back in rapport with us so that it doesn't have to resort to the flight. And we never want it to resort to the fight part. So then humans that will cover up what's not right and try to pretend like everything is right because that's what society wants us to do. And horses are just open books. They're showing you what's true right here, right now, and we can learn a lot from that. If we cover stuff up, oftentimes something worse is going to happen down the road. Humans tell stories based on past events. Horses tell the story based on what's going on right now. Now, you might say, well, I trained my horse, or my horse had bad experiences in the past, and that's why he reacts that way. But oftentimes, it's our remembering of the story that our horse went through that creates that reenactment. So we want to be really careful about that. I have had many, many horses that I have retrained, and that worry about that reaction or that reliving in my mind that reaction can possibly create it with my body language when I start to see signs that it's going to go that way. I'll be like, yep, that's what happens. Yep. And maybe another trainer comes in and works with the horse that doesn't know that story or has never heard that story. And then something can move through much quicker. So I learned that we're the ones that are oftentimes telling the story. And so when we let go of that past story and we deal with the here and now and we get present with our horses here and now, we can have a lot more and positive influence. Humans will avoid confrontation. Women especially will take responsibility for many things. We will, not have those little conversations that we need to have because we want everything to be fine. And horses are responding to what's happening now. So anybody that rides with me knows that I'll call that putting a brick in the wall. If we ask for something and the horse doesn't respond to it, next time we ask for it, and again, they don't respond to it, we're just putting little bricks in the wall because the horses are numbing out. And then all of a sudden, yeah, that's awesome. Meg says, I think sometimes we're even telling a different horse's story, with the next horse. And this is a really good point. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. I love that concept. So hold on to that for a second. So we're just, people will avoid, horses are responding to what's now. So if I say, when I turn, I use my rein to turn, then that's what I want. And if I turn and the horse doesn't turn, and then I'm like, la, 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 well, that's okay. Maybe he'll turn in a minute. And I try again, and la, 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 that's okay. The next time I say now I'm running at somebody, or I'm running toward a fence, or I'm going toward the wall or whatever. Now I have to be like, you got to turn. So we really want to be careful that the only way the horses can go on small aids is if they know what they are. So always that positive reinforcement. Use the smallest aid possible. But if it doesn't work, use as much as necessary. And then humans put their value. We put our worth and our own value in what we've done, earned, or accumulated. And horses just are. So think about, and then, so now getting back to what Meg was saying, humans put their thoughts, beliefs, and emotions into a horse's action. So I totally think that putting myself into my horse's shoes is a good idea to build rapport. What is he feeling right now? What does it feel like? What am I feeling like on his back? What does he feel? Am I gripping? Am I pulling? Am I, what? Sure. I want to put myself into my horse's body and imagine, what am I doing? Does that feel good? Am I explaining with my aids well? On the other side, horses don't think like people. They think like horses. So we've got to be really careful not to put our own beliefs into our horse's actions. He did that. He doesn't really want to go to work today. He did that because yesterday, I asked for leg yield, and if he felt that it was hard, and so today now he doesn't want to do leg yields. We mustn't get into that they're not thinking in the middle of the night how they cannot make that flying change, how they cannot take the bridle, how they can, bloat at the girth and make us worry that they're not okay. They're not thinking that. They're reacting at what's going on right now. Horses respond from instinct until we teach them better how to deal in this human world, which they can mentally understand it when we work with them step by step. But the way that we teach horses is through the way the horses perceive things, not the way that people perceive things. So we really want to be careful about that. And getting to Meg's point, that perception, if we've had a horse that, let's say, is resistant on the leg, and now we have taken on a way of riding with our legs, nervous to put our legs on, because the last horse we had, every time we moved our leg or touched our leg, the horse was kicking out or swishing the tail or jumping with the hind leg side to side. We have adopted a way of riding that actually causes that behavior now. Because if somebody touches your shoulders in a tickly way, you are going to be tickled. If they touch your shoulders in a relaxed and calm and connected way, your body is going to relax to that. And so if you're poking somebody, touching, letting go, then you're going to get defensive. Then no matter how they touch you, your muscles are going to be tight, right? You're going to feel uncomfortable. So think about that. What physical attributes am I manifesting in my horse because of responses that an untrained or not well-trained horse taught me in the past? Where could I have taught that horse a better response so that I could be riding? I always want to think, what does my horse need to know so that I can look like a professional up here, right? I need to teach my horse so that I can ride in that organized way. If I'm having to do a lot of crazy stuff up there, my horse doesn't understand me. And if I'm pretending like everything's going right and I'm sitting and not doing anything, but my horse is doing all these wrong things, that doesn't work either. So in order to manage fear, we need a basic understanding of the natural way the horse moves. The 3 gaits, the walk, trot, and canter. How did they naturally move without the rider? And then a little bit about the horse's natural instincts. If we have that basic understanding, then we can say, okay, well, my horse needs to learn to respond better. My horse needs to learn to give it my aids better. That's his nature. but I need to put some education. I need to install that software, but I need to understand my horse a little bit in order to train it. And then I need to remember that no matter what, whether I'm a trainer or not, I am training my horse anytime I interact with it. What kind of horse do I want? And then our balance must be independent. Our seat independent from our legs, our reins independent from our seat. These things are really, really crucial so that if we give away the reins, we don't feel wobbly up there. And if the horse is leaning on the reins, that does not affect our seat. Our seat can still keep swinging. This is so important. If we don't have that independent leg and seat, we are going to affect our horse in ways that we don't really want. If the horse starts to do something and then we grip in, we might be putting more energy into things that we don't want to. So I love lunging for this. If you ever feel that you're riding a horse that makes you feel a little more tense, makes you feel a little bit more fearful, lunging can always help you get your balance, start to feel your controls, and then go out and be able to manage it without losing your balance. And then, of course, we want to have our own personal awareness. How flexible are we? How does our breath feel? How coordinated? What's our own tension level? We want to have that personal awareness in order to manage our own fear. If we feel really tight, if we feel uncoordinated because of fear, then we need to work on that on the ground. If we're not flexible, something happened to us or whatever, we want to have that awareness. And it's impossible if we're standing on the ground and we're trying to bend those knees and those ankles. We're trying to keep our hips underneath our shoulders, and that feels uncomfortable when we're standing on the ground. Why is it going to feel comfortable when we're sitting on the horse? If our hips are really tight when we try to, do some yoga poses or something like that, if our hips feel really tight, why are they going to feel relaxed when we get on the horse? So we just trying to have that little bit of personal body awareness will really help with keeping our own fear under control, because we'll know our own bodies and what feels right and what feels wrong. We want to have an understanding of the application of the aid. So what aid should get what response? Feel for the horse responding correctly on the aid. We want to know what that is. We've got to develop that feeling. We want to have situational awareness so that we can take in a little bit what's going on. We can notice what our horse might be reacting to, but we don't need to be shocked, scared, or worried about it. We are in communication with our horse so that we can manage that situation. I think situational awareness is super important. And then accepting that mistakes happen, a willingness to get into the root cause and not just to put that icing on the cake. So if the root cause is that my horse is not balanced, I don't just want to put the icing on the cake by holding it up with my reins, right? I want to put the horse in balance by making the half halts, by controlling the size, the speed, and the energy in the steps. And that control means the adjustability, not the holding on to control. This is so important. And so that is ultimately what I feel is so important to you guys feeling in control when you are on your horses, is that those reins, when you want to go left, if you open your left rein, your horse should follow it, not resist it. If you want to slow down and you make a fist, or you have to give it a little, hey, wake up, to slow down, the feet should change. The neck should not just get rounder or harder, but the feet should change because you use those reins to slow your horse down. And then the suppling, that only happens because you can steer and because you can stop. Suppling is something that when everything is going along and the horse is holding the bit in the mouth, holding your hands in his mouth from the hind legs, that then every once in a while you might just say, hey, don't let that jaw get stiff on me, right? Don't lay it at the rein in a bad way. But if you can't steer and you can't stop, then the effect of the reins that is a place to start, that you can change the feet with those reins. Now, in our beautiful German classical system, they have this thing about never touching the inside rein. And we see all those pictures on the internet about this is what happens when you touch that inside rein and the horse gets all corrupted and it falls through the outside shoulder and all these things. And so now people feel that they are out of control of their horses. And so I believe that there is something in between, and that is that we teach the horses to follow the rein. And because they're willing to follow that rein, that doesn't mean you have to give away your outside rein. The neck doesn't have to be crooked because you open the rein and give direction. The horse can still stay straight because it's willing to turn to the direction. Then the legs will work to get those hind legs up into the outside rein. And I think the whole horse starts to operate as a unit. And I think when you're so scared to touch the inside rein, then the horse will be resistant on the inside. And then we end up neck reining everywhere, which I don't agree with. Indirect reins, I don't agree with. Direct reins, I agree with. Okay, so that the horse follows that rein. And of course, if it's following the rein, you can close the outside. That's how we make a half pass. That's how we make a shoulder in. These kind of things. I'm all on board with that. But a horse that you can't touch the inside, I think makes people feel very nervous. So that is my thing on fear and trying to eradicate it by teaching our horses what we need them to know. And then in the homework, I thought we could think of two things. Meg will like this. In what ways do you put human thoughts into your horse's behaviors? And then the other one is consider body awareness independent of riding. For instance, your balance, right and left, your breathing, if something gets stressful, how does your the strength of your left leg versus your right leg when you're walking or working, these kind of things. So that might be fun project for the week. And does anybody have any questions? If you so choose and you want to share your ideas, I will email the notes. So if anybody wants to share their ideas from the homework, I love it. Hello, Susan. Let me see. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to before I hang up? All right. If you got here because I sent you a invite, then probably I have your email. If I didn't send you an invite and you came through a different way, then please feel free to email me at Nancy at Carousel Coaching so that I have your email. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, you guys. Feel free to email me any questions that you might have, and I hope we see you again next week.